Legal Tokenization con una invitada conocida de la casa, por supuesto, aquí en piso y también otra invitada desde Alemania. Así que vamos a dar comienzo, lo presenta Legal Tech Summit y justamente una de las participantes, quien está aquí en piso conmigo, Agustina Pérez Comenale, es una de las cofundadoras del Legal Tech Summit. Ella es LLM abogada, escribana en Olivera Abogados. Forma parte del grupo de Legal Hackers Montevideo. También es profesora en la Universidad de Montevideo en la carrera de grado de Abogacía Legal Tech, en la carrera de grado de Notariado, Notariado Electrónico y en posgrado Notariado y Nuevas Tecnologías. Y tendremos también, Agustina, online la presencia de Shermin Voshmgir desde Alemania. Ella es fundadora de Token Kitchen. Paso al inglés para presentarla. Este Fireside Chat va a ser obviamente en inglés. Shermin is the author of the book Token Economy, the founder of Token Kitchen and Blockchain Hub Berlin. In the past, she was the director of the Research Institute for Crypto Economics at the Vienna University of Economics, which she also co-founded. Shermin studied Information System Management at the Vienna University of Economics and Filmmaking in Madrid. Be very welcome, Shermin. Agustina, adelante.
Muchas gracias, Alejandra. Well, first of all, I would like to I would like to say thank you to all the organization of the Blockchain Summit Global. It was actually a pleasure to be part of. And I also would like to say thank you to Shermin Voshmgir, that she's actually here online with us. First of all, I would like to thank you it's like the first part that is actually that you are participating in an event that is from Uruguay. You have already participated in one in Argentina. So actually, it's the first time that we have you here, not in Uruguay, but online. So we would like to thank you for your time. And also, I would like to thank you because you gave me the chance, because of Sebastián Heredia, an Argentina lawyer that is actually really well known in everything that has to do with tokenization. I had the chance to be part of the translation team of your big book. Shermin has two books that has to do with token economy. The first edition, and actually the second one, we had honored to be the part of the team of translators. So it was actually a pleasure. So thank you again, Shermin, for that opportunity and to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for putting your time to translate the book. It's the honor is on my side. It means that the content and the work was worth it, and it reaches people. And I think that we can condense some of the information today for the audience.
Yeah, it is really important actually for the audience to know that this book, it is actually available in open source, and you can also buy it online. So, and now it will be actually a Spanish version of the Token Economy second edition of Shermin Voshmgir that is going to be available in online between the University of Católica of Córdoba. So I know that they're going to be like big news. So we were going to be waiting. But first of all, I would like to, maybe in this fireside chat, the idea is to give the audience a little bit of what is actually going on with everything that you're talking about the Web3 and the token economy. So maybe it would be good for those who didn't read the book that you can give them, like just in a few words, a little bit of a concept of what is actually the Web3 and what it is like this revolutionary web that we are into like today.
Yes. So, what is the Web3, and why are tokens the killer application of the Web3? If we think of the kind of history of the internet, we've had the internet for a very long time, 60s, 70s actually, but most people couldn't use it until we had the emergence of the World Wide Web and the appearance of web editors and HTML, where anyone could easily create a visual website with a few lines of code, and anyone could use the links to navigate the internet. And you didn't need to understand programming language to navigate the internet. So if we think of what in the early 1990s, the World Wide Web was to the internet, it brought websites kind of easy to navigate websites and easy to create websites to the internet. And that kind of revolutionary step is the equivalence of that we're entering in the Web3. The Web3 is a new generation internet where we change the data structures in the back end of the internet. We collaboratively manage the data instead of having single institutions like Facebook, your bank, your university manage the data of the website that they're hosting and managing all your private information. So data in this Web3 is collectively managed by blockchain networks. They're like the backbone of this Web3. And there are other type of Web3 networks that manage identities, big data, kind of like pictures, videos, etc. But the whole point of blockchain networks, they collectively manage the state of who did what and when, and the atomic unit of who did atomic unit of this Web3 is a token. So tokens to the Web3 are what websites were to the early internet. And the problem is that for those who remember the early internet, the early 1990s, we could create internet sites, a website easily, but we didn't know what to do with it. And it took society over 10 years to realize that you could do e-commerce sites with a website. You could do a knowledge site like Wikipedia with a website. You could do, for example, a social media website like Facebook and MySpace before and Twitter after. But this didn't come in the beginning because people didn't understand the logic of websites. And we're at a very similar stage in this new era, the Web3, and the atomic unit are the tokens, but there are very many different types of tokens. And currently we're mostly speaking about cryptocurrency, tokens that have currency similar functions, but tokens can have many other more complex functions. And I'm hoping we will enter these questions today.
Yes, exactly. Like that is one of the main points that we were actually talking before this, and I already told you that it was actually like, for instance, in Uruguay, we have a bill that has been presented that has different concepts that has to do with what is blockchain, what is cryptocurrencies, but also it talks about different kinds of tokens. And we have a really hard time like trying to settle different categories of tokens or trying to understand like which token could be useful or what it has to do with the way we're using it or which law will apply or some things like that that is actually has to do with everything that has to do with the legal aspect of the token.
Yeah.
So for us, it is really important that you already have, and in your book, you talked a lot about every category of tokens that they are.
Yeah.
So it will be good for us, maybe if you can explain them, and also give a little bit of heads up, like for instance, which one do you think that is going to be the most useful ones or important in this industry?
Okay, so I think the first generation tokens were the so-called cryptocurrencies, and all started with Bitcoin, and the native protocol tokens of many blockchain networks that have that are like kind of fungible or that have identical properties, very much like money, and that can be easily traded. But as opposed to like state-owned money, many of these tokens don't have monetary stability. So one of the reasons they cannot be used for day-to-day money in many cases and are more investment objects that are easily tradable because of the nature of blockchain networks and the Web3 in general. We are now seeing many kind of diversification into many new types of token classes. We can create tokens are like, you think of them programmable money or programmable assets. A token is basically a simple smart contract that is collectively managed by a blockchain network. And it you can program very special properties into that contract. token contract. Token contract is a special type of smart contract. So instead of having a token that represents something like a virtual currency or a real currency, for example, a digital tokenized representation of the euro or a tokenized representation of the peso or the tokenized representation of the renminbi. This is what we call the central bank digital currencies. It's just a new type of representation of a type of money that we already have. So whether it's virtual currencies or state-run currencies that are tokenized, currencies are one as kind of token class. But there are other type of asset tokens. I think we have the big group of asset tokens, which could be currencies, virtual or real currencies, with stability functions or without stability functions, because we're starting to see many new virtual currencies, so-called stable tokens, that have inbuilt stability functions. But then we have tokens that can represent any type of real asset, like a commodity, gold, barrel of oil.
Even properties.
But
Real
also less fungible assets, like, for example, real estate. A house can be tokenized. The deed of a house can be tokenized. Ownership of a co-working space could be tokenized and fractionalized. The ownership of a private home could not only be tokenized, the deed, but we could now also fractionalize this deed. So a private person, instead of going, technically speaking, legally speaking, this is your kind of question, but technically speaking, we could represent the deed of a house with a token and then split this token, create fractional pieces, fractions of these tokens that represent fractional ownership tokens, to issue tokens for co-financing reasons. You could now offer these tokens to your bank to co-fund your your house, but you could, over specialized platforms, maybe even ask other private individuals to co-finance your private home. But obviously, you don't want to give them the rights to live in your house. You only want to give them the rights to get fractional rent at the end of the month, or to receive fractional when they exit, when they sell their fractional tokens, co-ownership tokens of your house, they can get a fractional value of the sold token. And the interesting questions that emerge in how to create these new type of asset classes that are much more fluid and programmable and more easily to customize is not only what is technically possible, but what is legally compliant. And in order to actually be able to issue fractional ownership tokens of real estate, we need the whole real estate industry to already be using blockchain networks. We need the deed management to be legally already also managed and recognized by nation states, the kind of attestation of blockchain networks. And once we have that, we can start to create interesting new asset classes that might be more inclusive. So whereas today you have to own the whole, you need to have a lot of money to be able to buy a house, even if you get credit. Many people cannot afford to buy a house, but with fractional ownership, you could co-invest into properties somebody else owns with maybe only $5,000. You could maybe never invest or afford your own house, but maybe you saved some money and you can co-invest it into a property that might have some kind of future earnings for you.
Yeah, that is actually a really interesting point that you are mentioning, because usually what happens here, for example, in Uruguay or even in South America, is that when we try to do this kind of project, like, for example, the one that you mentioned that has to do with real estate, that to do a like fractional ownership of a property, The thing is that usually they believe that that token, it will be like a security token, and it has to go with the regulation of a stock market. So that is actually a really big issue or problem, because maybe if you are actually thinking that it's going to be like a token that is going to do, I don't know, or it's going to work like in a close, to say somehow, market, it doesn't mean that you need to apply all the regulation of a stock market. Of course, if you're going to like put it in a marketplace or anything like that, it would be like a different scenario. So in those cases, what do you believe that it would be like the solution to actually give a try and to help these kind of companies to be part of the market?
Unfortunately, since I'm not a lawyer, it's hard for me to answer this question. From a legal perspective, I cannot answer your question. I think we have seen, I've been active in Austria and in Germany, and now I'm moving to Portugal. And in Austria and in Germany, I saw, because we worked with regulators during my time in the different institutions, when you create sandboxes, this is probably the best way to have a regulatory safe environment for startups to tightly work with the regulator, so the regulator can learn and can have some regulatory learning, while the startups can have some legal certainty. And the regulators need to learn about the dynamics and all the various possibilities of this that tokenization brings. Because one of the challenges that we have is that we try to understand, conceptualize, and regulate the possibilities of the Web3 with the notion of the early internet or the analog world. And this is never going to work. This is, I think, the challenge that we always have when we have big innovation cycles, is that we're trying to understand something that completely changes the dynamics of what, like the border between what is a physical asset and what is a real estate and what is money is dissolving, because everything is becoming much more easily transferable and in the end more fungible. And even non-fungible assets like real estate or art can be tokenized, can be fractionalized, and can have some much more market depth and liquidity and some kind of fungibility within their fractional tokens. So the concept of what is an asset or what type of assets we're talking about is changing. And I think that regulators are having a hard time, and which is why we need sandboxes. I think that's the only solution to allow innovation while having regulatory certainty and regulatory learning.
Yes, thank you. I think that it is really important to regulators to actually have a clear concept of the different kinds of tokens, and I believe that trying to understand these categories of tokens is actually really important to try to classify them like in a good aspect and try to solve these issues that companies have like in the market. But also, like you were mentioning, everything that has to do with identity tokens. Like we have seen a lot of news and everything that they are now talking about like even no identity tokens, more like wallets. That we need now to think about an identity that is actually a wallet that has different certificates that goes into your identity. What do you believe about that? That you think that is a good practice, that is actually a good key management to have a wallet as an identity?
Well, in the analog world, we have that. It's in the digital world that identities have become scattered and duplicated across the internet. So by consolidating this data chaos that we have in the Web 1 and the Web 2, and going back to kind of having one source of kind of identity information, and I control all my data and I choose who to share it with out of my wallet, but like of the data is always in my own wallet. or managed by my wallet wherever I choose to store it, but it's never stored on someone else's server. That is definitely, I think, the better solution, not for practical reasons. And this is not a revolution. It's actually a step back because in my physical wallet, this is my physical wallet, I have all my identity cards. This is not a new thing. So the new thing was the internet, when we started to have like 500 different digital identities that we lose sight of which passwords we use for which platform and which data we put on which platform, and is my address there still correct? This whole chaos of the Web 2 hopefully will be consolidated in the Web 3 with wallet management and wallet-based identity management.
Yeah, it's actually, we are not trying something new. Like, it will be just applying the technology to it, to say it somehow. But you also talked about everything that has to do with tokens, like engagement tokens, that this new like revolutionary idea of tokens, that because first of all, we were talking just about utility security tokens, but now there are like new categories, and maybe we will need to start thinking of subcategories of those of those tokens. So I listened to you in some like other webinars that you have done, and I listened that you were talking some of engagement tokens. That is like a new category of tokens. Maybe you can like go deeply about that.
You know, deeply, not really because of the time, but I think you are referring to the Yes, I think you're referring to the purpose-driven tokens, the engagement tokens, right?
Exactly.
So I call them purpose-driven tokens, and Bitcoin ultimately is very misunderstood because Bitcoin is being reduced to the token, but Bitcoin is actually a payment network. There is a protocol, which is kind of the constitution of that payment network, that is collectively managed. This public infrastructure, payment infrastructure, is collectively managed by a set of people who don't know each other and who don't have any legal contracts with each other. And the way kind of to incentivize those people to collectively manage this payment infrastructure is by incentivizing the people with the network token, which is created upon proof of work in the network. This is when the new Bitcoin tokens are minted and awarded to the people who contributed to the maintenance and the security of the network. Okay, so these tokens, Bitcoin actually, the Bitcoin token and the Bitcoin protocol is revolutionary because it's the first purpose-driven token that aligns kind of the actions of people all over the world who don't know each other, who don't have any legal contracts with each other, towards a collective goal. And we can take the logic of Bitcoin's purpose-driven token and apply it to social networks. For example, if the purpose is to collectively manage a social network like Steemit, and I mentioned the use case of Steemit in my book. Steemit is a blockchain-based social network, and many have followed after Steemit. And people get incentivized with the various set of Steem tokens for their contributions to the social network, whether they post content or like content or maintain the blockchain infrastructure of that network. And when they can prove that they contributed to the network, new tokens are minted, Steem tokens are minted and awarded in proportion to their contributions to the network participants. Another use case would be proof of CO2 emission reduction. A use case that we did in Vienna, for example, or many other use cases are building on if you can prove that you are reducing CO2 emissions, for example, as we did in Vienna, and the Vienna, we as in, I was working at the university in Vienna, and we were working with the city of Vienna, I'm not there anymore, but they're still working on a Vienna token that incentivizes the citizens to if they prove that they walked or took the bicycle or instead of taking the car, there is public data about how much CO2 they saved through their alternative mobility behavior. And per, I don't know, 10 or 20 kilogram of CO2 emission reduction, you can get a token. And with that token, you can, there are partner institutions like theater.
We actually got Shermin frozen. Well, we would like to thank you, Shermin Voshmgir, to be here. Actually, for us, it's like an honor and a pleasure to have her. So thank you again, Shermin. We will send you our regards. And first, we would like to invite you to see and to read her book, Token Economy, that is actually online and is actually available in open source. So thank you again, and thank you again to the whole organization of the Blockchain Summit Global to give us this opportunity.
It's driven kind of action. Yes. Yes.
Yes, sorry, Shermin. We were actually we got you frozen. So, but we were saying first of all, we would like to thank you again for participating in this event. For us, it's really important to have your point of view on everything that has to do with the token economy. So thank you again for participating. And we were actually inviting all the ones that are reaching us and the audience to read your book, the second edition that is actually available in open source and is going to be also available in Spanish version soon. So they will have to keep up and see the news. So thank you again for participating, and thank you again for the Blockchain Summit Global for having us.
Thank you for inviting me. Okay?
Thank you.
Have a great summit. Bye.
Fantástico. Bueno, Agustina, te rescato del inglés brillante, como siempre. Brillante, Agustina Pérez Comenale. Y te invito para que te quedes por acá, porque está cómodo, ¿no? El living de Concept está comodísimo, así que te invito para que te quedes por acá, porque además de compartir un buen rato con Agustina, ella va a ser parte del próximo segmento. Es el panel de innovación digital, implicancias legales y contables, que presentará Montevideo Legal Hackers en minutos nada más.